When people find out that I have a lathe, one of the questions I often get asked is, have you turned a bat? I'll be honest with you, I never have up until now. A bat is not something that I've needed. I stopped playing baseball long ago, and it's just not something that I need on a regular basis. But stay tuned to see how I turned a bat, and at the end of the video, why I needed it. Here I started out with a 2-inch thick piece of maple, and you can see that I don't have a straight edge. So I glued it onto a piece of MDF to act as a sled. I just put some hot melt glue on both ends, just on the outside, and then I rode that piece of MDF up against my fence to give me a straight edge. Once I had a straight edge, I could turn it around and end up with a square piece of stock. I do not have a lot of material here to spare. I want to keep the bat as big in diameter as I can down here at what's going to be the end that you would hit with. Not sure what that's called. And so I'm just using my bowl gouge and just making some slow cuts until I get it round. Again, trying to maintain as much diameter as possible. Once I have a reference as to where round is, I switch out to my roughing gouge, and this will fairly quickly remove the square edges and make it round. Now you saw there just a moment ago it did slip. The piece of wood actually stopped. That's because at this point I'm still turning between centers, so I don't have a real strong hold on it. It's not going anywhere because I'm pushing actually on it, but it's not a firm grip. In a bit I will turn a tenon on the handle end and I'll mount that in my chuck, and then it'll be much more secure. The other thing you'll notice here is because of the length of the bat, it's over 3 feet long, I do have to move my tool rest because my tool rest is only about a foot, so I do have to move that as I progress down the bat. And at this point I'm not worrying about shaping the bat in any way. At this point, just making it round. I'm done with my roughing gouge. I've switched back to a bowl gouge because the wood is round at this point, and the bowl gouge allows me to ride the bevel and give a much smoother cut. Here I'm just using my parting tool, and what I'm doing is making some reference marks. So I'll cut down to approximately the diameter I need. I'll stop and check this with my caliper gauge so that I know that those are the right depth. And then once I have those, then basically it's just a matter of connecting the dots. I'll just work from those cuts that I made back to the previous one and shape it in between. So here's the reference that I used. I found these dimensions online, and I was very careful to make sure that my bat matched these dimensions, especially in the barrel area or the handle, and you'll see why later that this was important, that I maintained those standards. So the initial cut I did was a little rough to those dimensions, but now I'm doing the finish cuts and again making sure that I'm following that pattern that you saw earlier. As before, I'm using my parting tool to make some reference lines where I want to match those dimensions. So these are the transition points generally where the diameters change. You can see there I'm using my caliper gauge to make sure that the depth of these lines are precisely where they need to be. Whereas previously I just knew that I was a bit large, but at this point I need to be precise. Once I have those reference lines exactly where I want, again, it's just a matter of using my bowl gouge or my skew to connect the dots and smooth it out in between. Once I'm at diameter with my bowl gouge, I switch over to my negative rake scraper to smooth everything out and get rid of those lines that you see here. Once I do this, this surface will be smooth, no lines, cut marks, and I'll be able to begin sanding. I don't think I've shown this on my channel before. Here I'm using my bowl gouge, but I'm using it very differently than what you normally would see. Normally I would ride the bevel and it would be a push cut. Now you can see I'm either pushing or pulling it, but I'm rolled the bevel over on its edge and I'm using the edge of the bevel more as a scraper. It's a little more aggressive than what you're now seeing with my negative rake scraper. And if you look to the right in this image, you can see the larger marks, cuts, roughness that I'm removing. That I would probably use my gouge on the side as a scraper. And then once that's done, I would use the negative rake scraper just to do the very finished cuts. So now I'm all done. I'm just going to do some sanding. And I just started off with sheet paper and did some final checks on dimensions just to make sure that it's where I want it to be. I knew it was close before this, and I just used my caliper sliding it up and down the barrel to make sure it's consistent, and then just sand any high spots down that if need be. Here I'm not actually cutting with my bowl gouge. All I'm doing is I'm pushing the heel of the bevel into the wood, and that just does a very fine smoothing of the wood. It really just compresses it and would be equivalent of a sanding or a burnishing and just gives you a really nice final smooth finish. One final check with the caliper gauge to make sure that I'm consistent and everything looks good there. I really spent a lot of time focusing on the barrel where the handle is, and again at the end of the video you'll see why I focused on this area. Now that the bat has been all sanded, I'm just working here with my skew chisel to round over the knob at the end of the bat, which would just keep your hands from sliding off. And in this case, it's just a rounded shape. And here's the finished product. The bat has all been sanded as well as burnished. No finish applied, but I just rubbed sawdust shavings onto the bat, held it on, created a bit of friction, which gives you a nice burnished finish. The next thing I did was I took the bat over to my laser engraver and I engraved a logo onto the bat. And again, the significance of this logo will become obvious at the end of this video. So now you can see why I needed a bat. I just needed it so that I could break it. On Saturday, I got my 2nd degree black belt, and as part of my testing, I broke the bat. I'd like to thank everybody from JVK that helped support me along my journey and those that helped out with my testing.